Let's talk about Jack the Ripper. The name itself brings a chill. It speaks of foggy London streets, gaslight, and a shadowy figure with a knife. For more than a century, we've been obsessed with this mystery. Who was he? Why did he kill? And how did he just vanish? The common picture is of a madman. A local lunatic, maybe a butcher or a slaughterman, someone from the gutters of Whitechapel. Someone who knew the maze-like streets and could disappear back into the squalor he came from. That's the simple, terrifying answer. But what if it's not that simple? What if the killer wasn't from the gutter at all? What if he was from the very top of society? What if he was brilliant, educated, and powerful? What if he was a doctor? And not just any doctor. What if he was the Queen's own physician? This is the story of Sir William Gull. It's a theory that takes the Ripper case out of the East End slums and places it right in the halls of Buckingham Palace. It's a story of a royal scandal. A secret baby, blackmail, and a brutal cover-up orchestrated by the most powerful people in the British Empire. It's a conspiracy theory, one of the most famous and elaborate of all time. It's probably not true, but the story itself is so compelling, so dark, and so perfectly plotted that it refuses to die. It tells us more about our own fascination with power and darkness than it does about the actual murders of 1888. To understand this theory, you first have to understand Whitechapel in 1888. It wasn't a nice place. It was the dark, beating heart of London's poverty. Overcrowded, filthy, and desperate. Thousands of people lived crammed into slum housing called rookeries. Disease was everywhere. Gin was cheap. Life was cheap. For women especially, options were limited. Many ended up on the streets selling their bodies for a few pennies to pay for a bed in a common lodging house for the night. This was the world of Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. These were the women Jack the Ripper chose. They were vulnerable, living on the fringes of society. They were easy targets, no one would miss them, or so the killer thought. The killings started in August and ended in November. They were brutal. The victims' throats were cut, and their bodies were mutilated in a way that shocked even the hardened police and public of Victorian London. But there was something else. The killer seemed to know what he was doing. He removed organs with a terrifying precision. Doctors who examined the bodies said the cuts were clean, made by someone with anatomical knowledge. A doctor, a surgeon, someone who knew the human body inside and out. This is the first seed of the Sir William Gull Theory. The killer wasn't just a frenzied madman, he was a skilled operator. Now, let's meet the man himself, Sir William Gull. In 1888, he was one of the most respected physicians in England. He was 71 years old. He had made significant contributions to medicine, identifying and naming conditions like anorexia nervosa. He was made a baronet for his successful treatment of the Prince of Wales, the future King Edward VII, when he fell ill with typhoid. He was physician in ordinary to Queen Victoria herself. He was the establishment. He was a man of science, reason, and immense prestige. The idea that he could be creeping through the back alleys of Whitechapel with a knife is, on the surface, absurd. So how did his name ever get connected to this horror? The story didn't come from the police in 1888. It came much, much later in the 1970s. It's a story woven from whispers of royal scandal and secret societies. It's a full-blown conspiracy. Here's how the theory goes. It starts with the Queen's grandson, Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale. He was known to his family as Eddie. He was second in line to the throne. He was also, by many accounts, not very bright and something of a problem. The rumors swirled around him his whole life. Rumors about his intellect, his sexuality, and his health. The theory places him at the very center of the Ripper story. According to the tale, Prince Eddie had a secret life. He would escape his royal duties and visit London's less reputable neighborhoods. In the art studio of a painter named Walter Sickert, he met a young, pretty working-class Catholic girl named Annie Crook. He fell in love. They supposedly married in a secret ceremony and had a child, a baby girl. This was a catastrophe for the royal family. Not just a scandal, but a constitutional crisis. The heir to the throne married to a commoner, a Catholic, with a legitimate child who could, technically, have a claim to the throne. It was unthinkable. The crown could not allow it. The Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, found out. The Queen was informed. The situation had to be handled. So the government's secret agents moved in. Annie Crook was snatched from the street. She was committed to an asylum, her mind allegedly destroyed by a crude form of brain surgery performed by none other than Sir William Gull. The baby was taken away. Prince Eddie was told his love had died, and he was sworn to secrecy. The problem should have been solved, but it wasn't. There was a loose end. Annie Crook had a friend, a woman who knew all about the secret marriage and the baby. Her name was Mary Jane Kelly. Mary Jane Kelly, seeing her friend disappear, decided to use her knowledge. She and a few of her friends, the other women who would become Ripper victims, began a blackmail plot. They threatened to expose the whole sordid affair to the press. Now, the scandal wasn't just a private shame. It was a threat to the monarchy itself. The blackmail had to be stopped. Permanently. This is where Sir William Gull re-enters the story, but in a much darker role. According to the theory, the Queen or Lord Salisbury turned to the loyal royal physician. Gull was not just a doctor, he was a high-ranking Freemason. The theory claims that this whole affair was seen by the establishment as a threat that needed to be eliminated with ritualistic prejudice. Gull was tasked with silencing the blackmailers. He was to be the executioner. But he wasn't alone. An old man, even a brilliant one, couldn't carry out these murders by himself. He needed help. He had an accomplice, a coachman named John Netley. Netley would drive Gull through the dark streets of London in a discreet carriage. They would hunt for the women on their list. Gull would lure a woman into the coach, kill her, and then Netley would help him dump the body in a dark alley. The coach explains how the killer could strike in different locations and disappear so quickly without being seen covered in blood. It explains the mystery of his escapes. The murders themselves were not just killings. They were warnings. They were, according to the theory, Masonic rituals, the specific mutilations, the way the organs were removed, the symbols supposedly left at the crime scenes. All of it was a terrifying message to anyone else who might think of threatening the crown. Freemasonry is a secret society with its own rituals and symbols. The theory claims Gull, as a master mason, was performing a dark version of these rituals on the bodies of his victims. He wasn't just killing them, he was enacting a judgment. The most famous piece of evidence for this Masonic link is the Golston Street graffito. After one of the murders, a piece of the victim's bloody apron was found in a doorway. Scrawled on the wall above it in chalk were the words, "The Jews are, the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The police commissioner, Sir Charles Warren, who was also a high-ranking Freemason, ordered the words to be washed away immediately, supposedly to prevent anti-Semitic riots. The conspiracy theory offers a different explanation. It claims Jewe is not a misspelling of Jews, but a reference to Jubela, Jubelo, and Jubellum, the three murderers from Masonic lore. Warren, recognizing the Masonic signal from a fellow brother Gull, destroyed the evidence to protect the conspiracy and the crown. So, you have a motive protecting the monarchy from a catastrophic scandal. You have a killer, a brilliant, ruthless physician acting on orders from the top. You have a method, a coachman, to help him navigate the city and escape. And you have a ritualistic element, the Masonic connection, that explains the bizarre nature of the mutilations. It all fits together like a perfect, horrifying puzzle. It explains why the killer had medical knowledge. It explains why he was never caught, because the police weren't trying to catch him. They were actively covering for him, led by their own Masonic commissioner. Jack the Ripper wasn't some random lunatic. He was an instrument of the state. This whole story was first presented to the public in a big way by a British journalist named Stephen Knight in his 1976 book, Jack the Ripper, The Final Solution. Knight's source was a man named Joseph Gorman, who claimed to be the illegitimate son of the artist Walter Sickert. He said Sickert had been involved in the conspiracy along with Prince Eddie, and told him the whole story. The book was a sensation. It was detailed, confident, and it named names. The theory got another huge boost in 2001 with the film From Hell, starring Johnny Depp. The movie is based on a graphic novel of the same name and dramatizes the Sir William Gull story. It's a visually stunning gothic horror film. It shows Gull as a chilling, opium-addicted mystic, performing his Masonic rituals in the dark. For millions of people, this movie is the Jack the Ripper story. It cemented the royal conspiracy in the public imagination. It's a fantastic story, it's dramatic, it's shocking, and it feels grander than the sordid reality of a man killing poor women in the slums. But here's the most important question. Is any of it true? The simple answer is no. Almost certainly not. When you start to look at the details, the entire elaborate structure falls apart. Let's start with Sir William Gull himself. In 1888, he was 71 years old. A year earlier, in 1887, he had suffered a serious stroke. He was in poor health, his movement was impaired. The idea that this elderly, frail man could single-handedly overpower, kill, and then brutally mutilate strong, albeit likely drunk, women in the dark is physically improbable. The Ripper's murders were fast, violent, and required a great deal of physical strength. Gull simply didn't have it. He suffered another stroke in 1889 and died in 1890. His own medical records and the testimony of his colleagues paint a picture of a man in his final decline, not a homicidal mastermind prowling the streets. What about the royal scandal? The secret marriage? The baby? There is not a single piece of credible historical evidence to support any of it. No marriage certificate, no birth certificate, no contemporary accounts, nothing. The entire story of Prince Eddie, Annie Crook, and their child comes from one source, Joseph Gorman, the man who spoke to Stephen Knight. And Gorman's story changed over time. He later retracted parts of it, and researchers have found that many of his claims about his own life and family were fabricated. He appears to have been a fantasist. Without his testimony, the entire motive for the conspiracy disappears. And Prince Eddie's involvement is even more unlikely. His own schedule, recorded in the court circular and personal letters, places him out of London on the nights of most of the murders. On the night of the double event, when both Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were killed, he was at the royal estate in Balmoral, Scotland, hundreds of miles away, surrounded by family and staff. It's hard to get a better alibi than that. Then there's the Masonic connection. While it's true that Sir William Gull, Sir Charles Warren, and other prominent figures were Freemasons, the interpretation of the murders as Masonic rituals is pure speculation. Experts on Masonic history and symbolism have comprehensively debunked Stephen Knight's claims. They argue that he twisted and misinterpreted Masonic lore to fit his theory. The Juez Graffito, the supposed centerpiece of the Masonic evidence, is far more likely to have been exactly what it looked like, an anti-Semitic scrawl, common in an area with a large and often persecuted Jewish immigrant population. Warren's decision to erase it was likely a genuine attempt to prevent a riot, a real and present danger at the time. The police cover-up is also a myth. The surviving police files from 1888 show a force that was completely overwhelmed, not conspiratorial. They were struggling with a new type of serial killer they didn't understand. Their investigation was massive. They interviewed thousands of people, followed hundreds of leads, and were clearly desperate to catch the killer. The idea that they were secretly protecting him is an insult to the real detectives who dedicated themselves to the case. But they didn't cover it up. They simply failed. So if the theory is built on the word of an unreliable narrator, requires us to believe an elderly stroke victim was a ninja-like killer, has no evidence for its core motive, and misinterprets all the supposed clues, why on earth do we still talk about it? Why is the Sir William Gull Theory so incredibly popular? Because it's a better story. It's as simple as that. The probable reality of Jack the Ripper is grim and unsatisfying. The killer was most likely an anonymous, misogynistic man named Aaron, or Joseph, or George. He probably lived in or near Whitechapel. He was filled with a private rage we'll never understand. He committed a series of horrifying crimes and then either died, was imprisoned for something else, or simply stopped, melting back into the anonymous crowd. He was a nobody. His evil was mundane. There's no grand conspiracy, no secret plot. Just ugly, pointless violence. That's a deeply unsettling conclusion. It offers no answers and no sense of order. The Gull Theory, on the other hand, gives us everything we want in a mystery. It gives us a name and a face. It makes the killer a genius, a man of intellect and power, which somehow makes him a more worthy adversary in our imagination. It gives us a powerful, dramatic motive rooted in class, power, and the secrets of the elite. A royal sex scandal is always going to be more interesting than the lonely rage of some forgotten man. The theory also taps into a deep-seated distrust of authority. We love the idea that the people in charge are hiding terrible secrets. A conspiracy theory that says the government and the royal family will literally kill to protect themselves feels plausible to many people. It confirms a cynical worldview. It suggests that the world is not random and chaotic, but is secretly controlled by powerful, shadowy forces. For some, that's a more comforting thought than chaos. And finally, it transforms Jack the Ripper from a serial killer into a figure of Gothic legend. He becomes an agent of a dark secret history. The story, as told in From Hell, is a modern myth. It's about the dark side of the Victorian age, where scientific progress and imperial power had a rotten, corrupt core. Sir William Gull, the brilliant physician who uses his knowledge to destroy rather than heal, is the perfect villain for that story. He represents the hypocrisy of the era. The truth is, we will almost certainly never know who Jack the Ripper was. The mystery is a blank canvas, and for nearly 50 years, the Sir William Gull Theory has been the most elaborate and fascinating picture painted on it. It's a work of fiction, a historical horror story that has taken on a life of its own. It tells us that the greatest monsters don't always lurk in the slums. Sometimes they wear fine clothes and have friends in high places. There is no evidence that Sir William Gull was Jack the Ripper. The historical consensus is that he was innocent, but he is now tied to the Ripper legend forever. He has become a character in the story, the respectable gentleman with a black bag, riding in his coach through the gaslit fog. He is the face of our most elaborate and enduring what if. The idea is just too good, too cinematic, and too perfectly dark to let go. And so the story continues to be told, not because it's true, but because in the grand, terrifying theater of the Jack the Ripper mystery, it's the best show in town. It takes a series of sad, brutal murders of forgotten women and elevates it into a grand tragedy of sex, power, and conspiracy at the heart of an empire. It's a lie, but it's a magnificent one.